The phone buzzed against my thigh, a harsh vibration, cutting through the soft jazz filling the reception hall. I pulled it from my dress pocket, keeping my expression blank. A message from Dad. "What have you done?" "The club is threatening to throw us out. The card is locked." I stared at the screen. Around me, amber lighting cast a warm glow across the white tablecloths. Daniel stepped up from behind, his hand settling on the small of my back, steady and present. He didn't ask what the text said. He didn't need to. Across the room, the honor guards stood rigid in dress uniform, brass buttons catching the light as they prepared to cut the cake. My people. My real family. My jaw tightened. I ran my thumb over the cracked edge of my phone case and didn't respond. No explanations, no apologies. I opened my email drafts and found the message I'd queued up weeks ago. One tap. That was all it took. 36 years of being the silent financial workhorse for the Ashworth family terminated in a single second. 5 months earlier, the English summer was thick with heat and humidity. I sat in a garden chair at my parents' house in Surrey, tracing condensation on a beer glass with my finger. My spine was straight, a habit the military drilled into me that I couldn't shake, even in civilian clothes. I scanned the perimeter of the garden out of pure instinct. Broken fence panels, overgrown weeds, a house falling apart, held together entirely by my bank account. 2 months before this moment, I'd signed a business loan guarantee for Cassian. I did it because I was still trying to be the good daughter, the reliable one, the workhorse who kept the whole operation running while everyone else played. The patio door slid open. Arabella stepped out, 40 minutes late to a family barbecue. She wore oversized designer sunglasses and a floral dress that looked absurd next to a smoking grill. Cassian trailed behind her like a pet on a leash, his polo shirt freshly pressed, collar deliberately popped. My father practically tripped over himself to shake Cassian's hand, treating him like visiting royalty instead of the sketchy car dealer he actually was. I took a sip of warm beer, then the fork tapped against the wine glass. "Listen up, everyone," Arabella announced, raising her left hand to catch the sunlight. A gaudy diamond ring flashed. My mother gasped. My father clapped Cassian on the shoulder hard enough to make him wince. Applause broke out. I sat still. "We're engaged," Arabella beamed, leaning into Cassian's arm. "And we've already picked the date. The engagement party is Springbank holiday weekend at Brighton Country Club." The air left my lungs. Springbank holiday weekend. Brighton Country Club. Those were my coordinates. That was my wedding date. Every single person standing on this patio had received my wedding invitation 4 months ago. They were stuck to their refrigerators with cheap magnets right now. I looked at my mother, smiling and wiping a tear. I looked at my father, already talking loudly about booking the country club's premium catering package. A package I knew for a fact he couldn't afford. Nobody flinched. Not one person spoke up. They had just paved over my wedding day like it was a pothole in the road. A cold, heavy numbness washed over me. Last year, I'd drained £12,000 from my savings to pay for my mother's gallbladder surgery. I slept upright in a hospital chair for 72 hours. My back ached for a week. I tracked her vitals when the nurses were too understaffed to care. When she was finally discharged, my father stood in the driveway and said to the neighbours, "Thank God for Arabella. She coordinated everything from her phone." I didn't say a word then. I just swallowed it. But this time Arabella caught me staring. She didn't look guilty. She didn't even look embarrassed. She adjusted her sunglasses and offered a careless shrug. "I mean, your wedding is pretty small anyway, Rosalind," she said, like she was asking me to change tables at a cafe. "Just a quick thing at the church with your military mates. You can bump it to June." My father turned toward me. He pointed a plastic fork with half-chewed sausage at my chest. "Don't make a scene," he ordered, his voice low and raspy, that familiar tone he used to keep us terrified as children. "Don't be dramatic, Rosalind. Your sister needs this. Cassian's family expects a certain level of presentation." Presentation. He was using my blood, my sweat, and my credit score to fund Cassian's presentation. I didn't yell. The rage inside me didn't boil. It froze over solid. I placed my beer down on the picnic table. Thump, I stood up and looked dead at my father with the exact same stare I reserved for soldiers who lied to my face. "The wedding date isn't moving," I said, my voice completely flat. My father's face flushed dark red, veins bulging in his neck. I turned my back on him, something I never did, and walked down the concrete path toward the driveway. Behind me, the shouting started. My father barking useless orders. Arabella playing the victim, her voice pitched high and whining. I reached my truck, yanked open the heavy door, and slammed it shut. The noise cut out instantly. The metal handle was hot from the summer sun. I sat in the cab, staring straight ahead, and didn't pick up the phone when it buzzed with incoming calls. I drove back to the RAF base with the windows down, letting the thick air hit my face. The wind couldn't drown out the buzzing. The bombardment followed me through security and straight into the operations room. The air conditioning was sharp and dry. I sat at my metal desk under fluorescent lights and stared at my phone. 4 missed calls from Aunt Margaret. 3 voicemails from Cousin Olivia. The flying monkeys had been dispatched. I played the first voicemail. "Rosalind, you're being completely unreasonable." Aunt Margaret's voice hissed through the tiny speaker, dripping with that fake, weaponized southern sweetness I'd heard my whole life. "Your father is under massive financial pressure right now. Just push your little chapel thing back a few weeks." Arabella already put down a non-refundable deposit. I hit delete. I shifted my eyes to the dual monitors on my desk. They displayed my bank statements, rows of black numbers that kept the Ashworth family floating. There was the second mortgage on that decaying house, sitting squarely in my name. There was the direct deposit from my operational pay, automatically routed every month to cover private school tuition for Arabella's son. There was the business loan I'd personally guaranteed for Cassian's car dealership. I paid for the roof over their heads and the uniform on my nephew's back. I remembered a Christmas dinner 3 years ago. I just returned from a 9-month deployment. I walked into the dining room carrying a heavy roasting pan, and my father pointed a beer bottle at me. "Look at her," he'd scoffed to my uncle loud enough for the whole table to hear. "Stomps around the house like she's invading a foreign country. Put on a dress for God's sake, Rosalind. Try acting like a woman." I was the workhorse. I was built to carry the heavy loads, take the hits, and stay out of the spotlight so the beauty queen could shine. The operations room door creaked open. Daniel walked in carrying 2 styrofoam cups of black coffee. He didn't ask how I was doing. He set a cup down near my keyboard and pulled up a metal chair. His ice blue eyes scanned my face, the eyes of a Navy trauma surgeon who looked at open wounds and death for a living without flinching. He gently pulled my financial files out from under my clenched fists. "You do not have to shrink yourself when you are with me, Rosalind," Daniel said, his voice low and steady. "He does not see you. He never will, but I do." Something inside my chest cracked open. The grenade pin I'd been gripping for 36 years suddenly slipped loose. For the first time in my entire life, the soldier was allowed to stand down. The secure line on my desk rang. I picked it up and pressed it to my ear. "Rosalind." My father's voice carried that same heavy dictatorial tone. No compromise, only a blind ultimatum. "People are being forced to choose. Family members are calling me confused. Arabella is an absolute wreck." I stared at the styrofoam cup in front of me, the dark coffee rippling slightly. "I am not moving the date, Dad," I said, my voice a flat horizontal line. "I sent those invitations 5 months ago. I pay the second mortgage on the house you're sitting in. I paid for Mom's surgery. I signed the loan guarantee for Cassian's car lot. I have done nothing but support this family." The line went dead quiet for a long, agonizing second. Then he delivered the kill shot. "She needs the support more than you do." The words hit the cold air and froze. "You're tough, Rosalind," he continued, his tone dismissive, swatting away my lifetime of sacrifices like a mild annoyance. "You always figure it out. You don't need the attention. Arabella is fragile. She needs this day to go perfectly. Be the bigger person for once." There it was, the absolute naked truth. He was punishing my resilience. He was punishing the fact that I survived my deployments, that I built a career, that I kept my mouth shut and paid the bills. My competence was my curse, and Arabella's parasitic weakness was her greatest asset. I sat in silence for exactly 5 seconds. The static hissed in my ear. In that 5-second window, everything shifted. The desperate, pathetic need to be loved by this man completely evaporated. "Yes," I said, the word hollow and devoid of any anger or sorrow. "Goodbye, Dad." I pulled the receiver from my ear and set it down. I turned back to my monitors and logged into the banking portal. Over the next 3 months, I became a ghost in my own life. Cancer Pal automatic payment. Second mortgage. Click. Revoke financial proxy. Arabella Taylor. Click. Withdraw guarantor status. Cassian's auto sales. Click. I severed the financial arteries one by one. I set the effective dates to trigger exactly when the engagement party was scheduled to begin. I moved the mouse to the final confirmation button and clicked. The screen flashed a bright, sterile green. Changes saved. Before we jump into today's story, I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Leave a comment and let's dive in. The phone rattled against the nightstand. It was 11:30 p.m., the night before the wedding. I sat on the edge of the mattress, staring at the glowing screen. Incoming call, Mom. I picked it up. The acoustics of a tiled bathroom came through. A toilet flushed. She was hiding. She'd locked herself in the master bathroom to make a secret call to her own daughter. Rosalind, she whispered, her voice thin and frantic. I'm so sorry, honey. I really tried to talk to him. Your father says if we leave now, it will humiliate Arabella, she rambled, her breath hitching. Cassian's parents are in town. They booked a whole block of rooms. If we drive to Brighton for your wedding tomorrow, it ruins the narrative. He says Arabella can't handle that kind of stress right now. The enabler, always protecting the parasite, always sacrificing the workhorse, she was choosing the path of least resistance. It is fine, Mom, I lied, my voice completely flat. Oh, thank you, sweetie. I knew you would understand. I pulled the phone away and hit the red button. I went into the contact settings. Barik caller. Diff contact. Gone. The morning was thick with humidity. The heat wrapped around my throat the second I stepped out of the transport vehicle. I stood in the vestibule of the church. My dress was heavy structured satin, no frills, no excessive lace, just clean, sharp lines. I stared straight ahead at the thick oak doors separating me from the aisle. I did not have a bouquet. I did not have a veil. I stepped up to the crack between the doors and looked inside. The wooden pews stretched out in long rows. The left side of the aisle, the bride's side, was completely empty, not a single cushion pressed down. No mother dabbing her eyes, no sister pretending to be happy, no father waiting to give me away. They were 5 miles away at the Brighton Country Club, drinking expensive champagne on my credit. I shifted my gaze to the right side. There was no empty space. Dozens of Marines sat shoulder to shoulder, their dark navy dress uniforms absorbing the dim chapel light, blood red piping on the collars, polished brass buttons catching the glare of the stained glass. In the front row sat Colonel Warren, retired, silver hair cropped close to the scalp. He looked toward the doors, caught my eye through the crack, and gave a single firm nod. My people, my squad. A wall of living steel, the oak doors swung open. A single low chord from the organ filled the room. No grand entrance music, just a steady marching rhythm. I stepped into the aisle alone. I pulled my shoulders back, locked my shoulder blades together, and lifted my chin. My eyes locked dead ahead. Heel, toe, the exact measured stride of a military parade deck. My heels struck the wooden floorboards with a sharp, rhythmic crack. I did not shed a tear. If I let the grief in for even a second, my spine would shatter. Discipline was the only thing holding my skeleton together. Daniel stood at the altar in his navy whites. The bright uniform made him look like a beacon in the cold room. He watched me walk the gauntlet alone. He broke protocol, walked down the wooden stairs, and met me at the end of the empty row. He reached out and took both of my hands. My fingers were ice cold. His hands were warm, calloused from holding scalpels. He squeezed my fingers hard. You will never have to fight for my love, Rosalind, he whispered. You are done fighting for a seat at the table. He poured a heavy dose of anesthetic straight into my open wound. I took a deep breath and nodded. We turned and walked up the steps together. The vows were short. No poetry, just absolute unbreakable facts. We traded rings. We sealed it. The reception was held at a private hall near the water. I sat at the head table, staring at my plate. Colonel Warren stood up. He picked up a glass of neat bourbon. The room went dead silent. Major Ashworth, he started, his voice booming effortlessly across the room. She is a logistical nightmare if you're on the wrong side of her supply chain. A low chuckle rippled through the room. She protects her people. She bleeds for her people. She carries the weight so the rest of us can walk light. Tonight we have the absolute honor of protecting her. He raised his glass to the Major and her new husband. 50 voices echoed in unison, a deep guttural sound. I reached down and pulled back the heavy satin sleeve of my wedding dress. Strapped to my wrist, completely out of place against the elegant fabric, was my black digital tactical watch. I stared at the LCD screen. 8:44 p.m. I watched the seconds tick down. The number flipped 8:45 p.m. Right at that exact second 5 miles away, The automated servers at my bank executed their final commands. The cancellation notices hit the Savannah Crest Country Club management office. The foreclosure warning hit the family lawyer. The revoked loan guarantee hit Cassian's dealership. The financial blood supply was severed. The bomb had successfully detonated. I did not need to be there to know what was happening. The banquet manager approached my father's table. He did not smile. He carried a black leather check presenter, clutching it tightly against his ribs. He leaned down, keeping his voice low, but the sharp acoustics of the ballroom carried the tension to the surrounding tables. "Sir, the primary card on file has been locked by the issuer. We require a cash settlement of £12,000 before the main course is served." The jazz band stopped playing. Claire froze. A crystal champagne flute hovered an inch from her lips. Her oversized diamond ring caught the light, a heavy, useless rock. Cassian snatched the leather folder. He muttered, curses, his face flushing deep red. He pulled a plastic card from his wallet and shoved it at the manager. "Run this one," he snapped, "and tell the kitchen to hurry up." The manager pulled a handheld point-of-sale terminal from his apron. He swiped the card. The digital screen flashed a hard neon red, declined. The color drained from my father's face. The fake aristocracy, the country club membership, the unearned pride. All of it burned to the ground in a single silent electronic transaction. The parasite had killed the host, and now it was starving. On the nightstand next to my hotel bed, my phone started to vibrate. Tyler, Arabella, Aunt Margaret. The barrage of incoming texts and frantic missed calls came through in a continuous overlapping wave. The phone buzzed. The sound drilled into my skull. It morphed into a high-pitched electronic beep. The air in the hotel room changed. The smell of expensive floral arrangements vanished. My lungs filled with the scent of copper, dirt, aviation fuel, iodine, and cold sweat. 6 years ago, Helmand Province, the medical tent was a canvas oven. The heat was trapped under heavy fabric, baking us alive. The generator outside roared, coughing thick black diesel smoke. A young corporal lay on the metal trauma table, 20 years old, barely out of basic training. His combat boots were still laced tight, but everything above his right knee was ground meat. Shrapnel from a mortar shell had turned his femur to dust. The tissue was dark, purple, and black. Necrosis was already setting in, moving fast through the crushed veins, poisoning his bloodstream. Blood pooled on the aluminum floor. It soaked through my boots. The corporal reached up and grabbed my forearm. His fingers dug into my skin, slick with his own blood. "Do not take my leg, Doc," he choked out, his eyes wide and rolling back from the morphine and massive systemic shock. "Please, I have to go home. Do not take it." I looked down at his mangled leg. Then I looked at the EKG monitor over his head. The green line was spiking, erratic, threatening to flatline. The infection was racing toward his heart. Spare the leg and watch the boy die, or cut off a piece of his body to save his life. My hands were shaking. I forced my spine straight. I locked my jaw. I shut down the human part of my brain that wanted to hold a dying kid's hand. "Bring the saw," I ordered, my voice completely hollow. "Take the leg above the knee, now." The corporal screamed. A raw animal sound that tore through the canvas walls and buried itself in my brain. "We cut off his leg. We stopped the rot. We saved his life. But you do not make a call like that and walk away clean. You carry the ghost of that severed limb forever." The phone buzzed again, yanking me out of the bloody sand and throwing me back onto the cold tile of the hotel floor. I stood in the center of the bridal suite. The room was perfectly silent except for the frantic vibration on the nightstand. I walked over and stared at the glowing screen. Tyler called the bank. "Now this is illegal, Arabella. You ruined everything. They are kicking us out. Daddy is having chest pains." I looked at those words. I did not feel guilt. I did not feel a trace of regret. I did not even feel anger anymore. The trauma of Helmand Province provided absolute cold clarity. My family was the crushed tissue. They were the necrosis. For 36 years, they had been feeding off my system, spreading their debt, their entitlement, and their toxic pride into my veins. If I did not cut off the supply line, the rot would reach my heart. They would drain every penny of my operational pay, destroy my marriage, and leave me completely hollowed out. Cutting off the money was not an act of petty revenge. It was clinical triage. It was a pure survival tactic. I had to amputate the Ashworth family to save Rosalind Ashworth. Daniel stood near the large bay window overlooking the harbour. He unbuttoned his white uniform jacket and slipped it off his shoulders, laying it neatly over a velvet chair. He did not ask about the phone. He just watched my face, reading my vitals from across the room. I picked up a glass from the wet bar and filled it with tap water. The water was lukewarm and tasted heavily of chlorine. I swallowed it down. My throat was dry, still coated in the phantom dust of the desert. They figured it out, I said, my voice a flat horizontal line. They just realized the bank is permanently closed. Daniel gave a slow, understanding nod. On the nightstand, the phone finally stopped vibrating. The screen went dark for 3 seconds. Then it lit up again. This time it was not a text message. It was a phone call. The caller ID flashed in large, bold letters. Dad. He had not called me directly in months. He only issued orders through my mother or Arabella. Now the king was standing outside the locked gates, demanding entry. The arrogance was gone, replaced by blind panic. I walked over to the nightstand. I pressed my thumb against the glass screen and swiped green. I lifted the phone to my ear. It was a goddamn war zone on the other end of the line. The background noise was a chaotic, humiliating mess of overlapping voices, scraping chairs, and sheer panic. I could hear Arabella in the distance, her voice pitched up into a hysterical shriek. She was screaming at a banquet waiter, her southern belle facade completely stripped away. Cassian was shouting over her, his words slurring together in a panicked drawl, and then the heavy congested breathing of my father right against the receiver. "Laura, what the hell did you do?" he demanded, his voice a raspy bark. He was breathing hard, the wet rattle in his chest amplified by the phone's microphone. But he was still trying to project authority, still trying to rein in the chaos by flexing a muscle he thought he possessed. The club manager just embarrassed us in front of Cassian's entire family. The cards are locked. His business accounts are frozen. The bank is telling him his guarantor pulled out. You work in logistics. Fix it right now. Call whatever fraud hotline you need to call and fix this mess. I listened to the absolute delusion in his voice. He actually believed it was a mistake, a bank error. The arrogance was so deeply embedded in his bones that he could not fathom a reality where he was not the king of his decaying castle. "There is nothing to fix, Dad," I said, my voice a flat, dead calm. I delivered the words like a casualty report. "It is already done. I am at my wedding reception." "What are you talking about? What did you cancel? Which accounts?" I looked at my own reflection in the dark glass of the window. My posture was rigid, shoulders squared, chin level. I locked onto the target. "Your back taxes," I said. "I paid them. The second mortgage on the house you're sitting in right now, the one that was 3 months in arrears. I carry it. The private school tuition for Arabella's kid. It is paid directly from my military operational pay. And 6 months ago, I signed the commercial loan guarantee for Cassian's used car lot so the bank would not repossess his inventory." I did not raise my voice. I let the facts fall like artillery shells, precise and devastating. I let the math do the bleeding for him. "Do you remember my deployment to Helmand Province?" I asked, my tone dropping to a low, quiet hum. 3 years ago, you and Mom took Arabella down to the Cornish coast for a week. You rented a cottage right on the water. I sat in a sandbag bunker in 40-degree heat, using a secure satellite uplink to wire 12,000 pounds to your checking account so the bank would not foreclose on your house while you were drinking cocktails on the beach. I let that hang in the air, the absolute undeniable truth of it. The silence on the other end was absolute. It was the sound of a massive bloated ego being punctured and deflating into nothing. I could hear the exact moment his brain processed the raw data, the moment he realized he was not the provider. He was not the patriarch. He was a dependent, a parasite living off the scraps of the daughter he treated like a stray dog. "Laura, you paid." He could not even finish the sentence. The humiliation was physically choking him. He had just realized he had slaughtered his only cash cow to feed a leech. "For the last 3 months, I've been pulling it all back," I said, spacing my words out evenly, deliberately. I cancelled the auto drafts. I revoked the guarantees. I liquidated the joint accounts and moved the capital to a secure trust. You were forced to make a choice. You chose your favorite daughter. You chose to protect her fragile ego over attending my wedding. You made your call, Dad, so I cut the supply lines. You wanted to treat me like the least favorite child. Now you get to live like it. I pulled the phone down. I pressed the red icon. The call ended. The screen went completely black. The sudden silence in the hotel room was deafening. I stood there for a long time, staring at the black glass in my hand. I waited for the guilt to hit. I waited for the heavy, crushing weight of daughterly obligation to settle back onto my chest. It never came. The tumor was gone. The host was free. Daniel stepped up behind me. He did not ask how it went. He just wrapped his arms around my waist from behind and pulled my back against his solid chest. He rested his chin on the top of my head. I let my shoulders drop. The rigid military posture I'd maintained for 36 years slowly dissolved. I leaned back into him, letting him take my weight. "Tonight, the war is over," he said quietly. "Tonight, you finally get to come home." I smiled. A real, genuine smile. 4 months later, a wooden stake stabbed into the dying yellow grass of a front lawn in Brighton. Attached to the wood was a stark white and red sign. Foreclosure. Bank owned. It sat on the exact spot where Arabella had stood, wearing oversized sunglasses, flashing a blocky diamond ring. That ring was gone. Cassian bolted the exact same night the credit cards declined at the country club. He left her standing in the lobby in a cloud of tire smoke and unpaid catering bills. The blast radius of my financial cutoff leveled their entire fake empire in less than 48 hours. The bank seized the house. The dealership went into receivership. The parasitic host finally starved to death. 200 miles north, the air in Bristol was quiet. I stood in the center of my new study. Hardwood floors, clean sharp lines, no clutter, no chaos. I held a microfiber cloth, carefully wiping a thin layer of dust off a heavy glass shadow box. Inside the case, pinned to dark felt, rested my Naval and Marine Corps Commendation Medal. Next to it, a folded British flag. Outside, a low-pressure system stalled over the Bristol coast. Heavy rain hammered the tin roof of the front porch. A steady, relentless drumbeat. It washed the salt and grime off the streets. Then the rhythm broke. A dull, hesitant knock at the front door. My spine stiffened. Muscle memory took over. I set the shadow box down on the mahogany desk and walked down the dim hallway. The floorboards did not creak. I reached the heavy oak door, grabbed the brass handle and pulled it open. The porch light flickered, casting a pale yellow glow into the storm. A man stood shivering under the overhang. He wore a cheap, thin nylon windbreaker soaked completely through, clinging to his stooped shoulders. Water dripped from the frayed brim of a faded baseball cap. It took my brain a full 3 seconds to process the visual data. It was my father, the dictator, the man who pointed a sausage on a plastic fork at me and told me not to be dramatic. He looked incredibly small, hollowed out. The arrogant posture was gone, replaced by a desperate physical collapse. He did not try to push his way inside. He kept his eyes glued to the wet wooden floorboards of the porch. "Rosalind," he croaked. His voice was weak, stripped of all bass, stripped of all command. It was the sound of a completely broken man. "I do not understand. You never acted like you needed anything. You never asked for help. You just handled it. You handled everything." He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his wrinkled throat. "I thought Arabella was the weak one. I thought she needed the protection. I thought you were bulletproof." He looked up. His eyes were red, heavily bloodshot, sinking deep into his skull. The sheer exhaustion radiating off him was palpable. "A pathetic, fatal miscalculation," he whispered. "A misunderstanding that has slowly poisoned a father and daughter for over 3 decades. My jaw tightened. "Weak," I said, stepping closer to the threshold. The cold mist hit my face. I looked down at him. There was no hatred left in my eyes, just cold, distant pity. "She falls apart the second things get hard and you rush in to sweep up the glass," I said, my voice a quiet rasp, sharp as a scalpel. "I survived 3 combat deployments. I pulled shrapnel out of 20-year-old kids. I slept in the dirt and never broke down once. So that meant I was supposed to just suffer in silence because I carried the weight without screaming? I deserved to be the pack mule?" He flinched. The truth hit him like a physical blow to the chest. He swayed slightly on his feet. The wind whipped sideways, soaking the bottom of his jeans. He reached up with a shaking, calloused hand and wiped his face. It was impossible to tell where the freezing rain ended and the tears began. The man who cared about nothing but presentation. The man who let a used car salesman humiliate his own flesh and blood was standing on my porch sobbing. He looked at me. He really looked at me. Maybe for the very first time in 36 years, he saw the scars. He saw the heavy, invisible toll of being the strong one. "Strong girls still need their dads, do they not?" he choked out. The words tore his throat apart. They hung in the damp air, heavy and devastating. My chest seized. The titanium plates I had built around my heart cracked just a fraction of an inch. But it was enough. I let the anger drain out into the puddles on the porch. I let go of the phantom limbs of my childhood. I looked at the broken old man in the rain. Yes, I said. It was barely a whisper, but it cut through the storm. They do. He nodded slowly, his chin trembling. He did not ask for money. He did not ask for a place to stay. He did not ask for forgiveness. He just accepted the absolute crushing finality of what he had destroyed. He turned around. He stepped off the wooden porch and walked out into the freezing downpour. He did not pull his hood up. He stopped at the edge of the driveway and looked back over his shoulder, squinting through the sheets of rain. "I am proud of you, Rosalind," he said. The words were swallowed by a crack of thunder. They were 30 years too late to save a family, but they were just in time to set a hostage free. I reached out and pulled the heavy oak door shut. The deadbolt clicked into place, a sharp metallic sound of absolute closure. I turned around. Daniel was standing at the end of the hallway. He wore a faded grey t-shirt and sweatpants. He did not ask who was at the door. He walked forward and held out his hand. I took it. His grip was warm, steady, grounding. I let out a long, slow breath. The tension completely left my shoulders. I smiled. A real, genuine smile. The war was over. The last soldier was finally home.